Considering their anxiety and tensions are very high at the moment as I am filming this, rather than doing something from 2024, because I'm kind of burnt out on 2024 releases at the moment, if I'm going to be honest, I decided that I should probably do something that was a little bit more cheesy, a little bit more lighthearted. So I've gone back to the 90s, because 80s and 90s cheese is the superior kind of cheese. And when I tell you that this movie is genuinely about a vampire stuck in a donut shop, I'm not actually kidding. But if you don't know anything about Blood and Donuts from 1995, let me quickly fill you in. Blood and Donuts from 1995 is a vampire horror comedy. In 1994, in Toronto, a vampire named Boyer awakens from his 25-year sleep in a basement when he is hit by a golf ball. While hunting a rat to eat, he meets up with a cab driver who is in trouble with some criminals and a female donut shop worker who gets stuck in the middle. Befriending them both, they take on each other's problems as he tries to protect them and at the same time endangers them by bringing them to the attention of an ex-lover from years past who has been seeking him since they parted. Now they must form a bond of survival, instinct, passion, blood, and donuts. If you're new here, I go by Hordes, and if you're not new, welcome back. I talk about horror movies here on my channel on Mondays and Fridays, but as always, when it comes to watching movies, I am now going to go and watch Blood and Donuts from 1995 off camera, so that way, if you too want to watch this vampire comedy about a man stuck in a donut shop, nothing will be spoilt for you, because nobody wants to watch a movie that you've just watched somebody else watch from start to finish, and I keep it spoiler free here on my channel.
Donuts! Donuts!
Kiwi donuts, I don't care that they are 75 cents Canadian in 1996. Who thought that kiwi in a donut was a good idea? Also, the director David Cronenberg has a cameo in this as a crime boss. Surprisingly, this is not the first horror movie that I've reviewed here on my channel that is about donuts, because last year I watched Attack of the Killer Donuts, which is terrible, by the way. Don't do it. So, out of the two, Blood and Donuts is definitely the better movie, but I'm not about to start actively seeking out more horror movies with donuts in it to compare this to. Like, how many can there possibly be?
There's so many of them.
Our main vampire, Boyer, is one of those, I'm a good vampire and I only consume rats. And as somebody that has played so many hours of Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines, I can tell you, not good if you're a Von True, but if you're a Nosferatu, go absolutely wild. But I feel like there was a missed opportunity here, because the number of rats that get eaten in this reminds me very much of a movie that I grew up watching, and I wondered at some point, is there going to be an army of vampire rats that turn up like in the Little Vampire movie when the family are eating the cows and all of a sudden you get a herd of vampire cows turn up? There is very much a romance plot in this between Boyer and Molly, who is the girl that works in the donut shop, and all I can say is this romance plot is Twilight before Twilight, and coming from somebody who cannot stand the Twilight franchise, this is not a compliment. Like, Boyer is very, I'm a good vampire and I'm a different vampire because I've got shaggy hair that looks like a tiny miniature poodle and, you know, I have morals. And luckily for him, Buffy the Vampire Slayer did not start airing until 1997 when we get introduced to Angel, who is a vampire with soul. So, you know, I'll let him off for now. But yeah, he's very like Edward Cullen, like, no. But I will say, I kind of feel slightly sorry for his ex, Rita. Now, when you find out Rita's backstory, you find out that they were together 25 years in the past, and all of a sudden, he basically ghosts her and goes to sleep for 25 years and doesn't tell her any of this, which kind of has strange parallels to my own recent personal breakup, but we won't go into that. Like, let's just say that Rita's backstory was kind of relatable to my own current situation. But that's where the similarities end, because I'm not about to turn into the insane stalker that Rita turns into when she finally turns up in this movie. Like, let's just say she breaks into his house at one point and she tries to kill him in the graveyard. Like, no, girl, I understand. I've been there. I'm currently there. But you deserve better. And I will say, luckily she's not looking for any kind of romance with this guy. Like, she was promised that she would get turned into a vampire so she could stay young and beautiful forever. and she was denied this, so the only thing that she is actively seeking from him is to be turned into a vampire, because let's not turn this into a love triangle. Let's not bring in a third character to be like, oh, Jacob's here. The whole Twilight gang's turned up before Twilight came out. More plot points. Earl is having problems with David Cronenberg's two minions because, like I said, David Cronenberg has got a cameo in this, and it's possibly the best acting in the entire movie. But we'll talk about the acting in a bit. So Earl's got problems with his two minions. Molly has also got problems with his two minions. And it's never disclosed why that these two have problems with his minions before Boyer turns up. Because all of a sudden, the minions have a problem with Boyer because David Cronenberg tells them that they've got a problem. And, you know, they need to come out swinging and put this guy in his place. But in all honesty, there isn't really that much plot in this movie. It feels like lots of small sections of dialogue linked together where everybody is having like everyday conversations that are building up the relationships rather than moving the action along. So it's like conversation. Ooh, something happens. Let's have a bit more conversation. Something might then happen again.
It could go either way.
It's basically a plot built on friendship and building relationships rather than actions and consequences, we'll say that. But I have to mention the sexy Dreamtime sequence because, oh boy, am I so glad that that's not how it works in the real world, because we would all be royally screwed. The acting is all over the place. It's one of those where it absolutely depends on who is on screen at the time. Like, Boyer is probably the strongest acting, like, role in this. But I will ask, as I have never been to Canada, if you live in Toronto, does everybody have accents that just change all the time? Or is it just this, like, fictional version of Toronto that they've created for this? Because when I tell you that Earl's accent, it is like if you took every single character from Goodfellas and smashed it into one character. That's Earl's accent, and Earl has a different accent to Molly, who has a different accent to Boyer, who has a different accent to Reed. Like, nobody sounds like they're from the same place. The effects in this are wonderfully terrible, and I genuinely mean this, because while there are a few practical effects in this, more on the makeup side, like some burns and things, there's not really that much that I can talk about when it comes to that kind of effect. But there's the wonderfully questionable CGI in this. Like, to give an example, there is a scene where they jumpstart a man's heart by literally using jumper cables and a car battery. And the second his heart starts working, the car radio starts playing as well, which levels of insanity I didn't know that I needed. And it was probably the only time I actually laughed in the entire movie. Now, the vampire transformation sequence, that's probably the best effect in the entire movie, and simply because how it's done is kind of similar to how it's done in Buffy the Vampire Slayer, but it's a lot more subtle and less like gnarly eyebrows work. So when the transition happens, it's a lot smoother and it looks a lot more seamless. Like, it's more like what you would expect an actual vampire to possibly look like if they're still going for the I'm sexy with my miniature poodle hair. There is a song that is used multiple times on this soundtrack, and it sounds like the song Garden of Love from Meet the Feebles, which is what my brain started singing every time it heard this damn song, and envisioning Heidi Hippo walking out, because oh boy do I love the movie Meet the Feebles. And now that I mention it, if you watch this movie and you've seen Meet the Feebles, you will now also hear Garden of Love. Garden of... While Blood and Donuts is a horror comedy, I would say that this is definitely more a horror romance with comedic elements thrown into it. Absolutely. The romance plot comes first and foremost in this over the comedy. And I will say about the comedy, the only time that I laughed is the time that I mentioned with the car battery. There was zero literal or figurative laughter going on for me for the rest of the movie, which is 100% a personal thing, so while it doesn't work for me, it will certainly work for somebody else. Humour is incredibly subjective, as we all know. But in the end, I am actually going to give Blood and Donuts from 1996 a 2.5 out of 5 stars, and that is simply because The romance plot in this is far too much like Twilight for my liking, like far too much like Twilight. And if you don't like the Twilight movies, the romance in this is not going to work for you either. But there are enough redeeming things in this movie that go along with the romance plot where I can say it is quite enjoyable, but that romance plot though. So there you have it, my initial thoughts and my review for my first time watching Blood and Donuts from 1996. If you've also seen this movie, I would love to know what your thoughts and opinions are on it down in the comments section down below. And if you are interested in watching this one, it is available right here on YouTube. So I will leave the link to it in my description bar down below so you don't have to go searching for it. And obviously, it will be free. If you would like to know where else you can find me though, I am also over on Instagram and Letterboxd at HordesOfHorror, where I've watched over 170 horror movies so far this year, so there's plenty that I haven't spoken about right here on YouTube. But speaking of YouTube, I will be back on Monday, and this time it will be a different kind of list video, because believe it or not, I have had my channel 18 months at this point, but I have never really sat down and spoken about myself before. So we're gonna change this in the coming week because it happens to coincide with my birthday. So until next time, bye.